Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is going to be the next video in our how to play map series where I go ahead and talk to you guys about how to play every single map in the game, at least the ones that are the most popular. I made a couple of videos like this before, so if you guys missed them, definitely check them out. And I got the cat with me here, so that's always cool. Today we're going to be talking about how to play Black Forest, which is a very classic map in Age of Empires. It's been with us for as long as we can play the game, pretty much for a long time, and it's truly a fan favorite. A lot of you guys out there play this map on the regular, and it's how you guys actually got into the game. And I remember I used to play this map quite a bit myself. The thing about Black Forest and this episode in general for our map series is that it's played very differently than other maps. First of all, this map is usually played not in 1v1 but in team games, most notably 4v4s. It's also mainly played on Explored, and this is actually the default setting on the rank ladder where the whole map is actually visible to you, except you still have like the fog of war. So you don't have like the black stuff on the map, but you still have the gray stuff, if that makes any sense to you. But we're still going to go ahead and dive into what the map looks like and what the common strategies are. However, we're just going to go about it from mainly the perspective of team games, so 2v2, 3v3, and 4v4, and I'll just quickly touch up on what you can do in 1v1s if that's your thing. Shout out to Fatslop. Alright, so to start things off, let's go ahead and take a look at Black Forest just to understand what we're dealing with here for those who are completely new. Black Forest is a map that's extremely true to its name. It has a dense forest that covers almost the entire map. In fact, usually the sides and the majority of the exterior of the map is completely covered in woodline. However, where the player spawns, so in 4v4 it would be 8 players, where any player spawns there's going to be a pretty big area of land that you can develop your economy and kind of spread out your base or whatnot to kind of build your kingdom up. And there's also narrow passageways that connect each of the players. So in the team game, you're going to have a passageway connecting you to your allies, and then also different passageways connecting you to your enemies. These passageways are usually anywhere from like 5 to 10 tiles long in general. However, there could be pretty big gaps in the forest that could be up to like 20 tiles, and in some cases it could be pretty open. It's quite random as to how many gaps there will be, so sometimes you can have only one gap connecting you to an enemy, and sometimes you can have 2 or 3, and so it's very important that you analyze and locate these gaps between your allies and your enemies as fast as possible, because if you wall these gaps up, there's basically no way to pass from your side to the enemy side and vice versa. So these choke points create a very strategic element to the map, and it's incumbent that we control them in order to dictate how the map is played. Of course, we all know that in Imperial Age, you can cut the forest using onagers, maybe even ballista elephants or trebuchets, but in the early game, these tools are usually not available for you. So until the late game, walling up those chokes are going to create a very strategic position for you and your team. Now that we understand how the map looks like a little bit, let's talk about what to play for. So we already talked about the forest and all that, but there's actually a couple special elements to Black Forest that's definitely worth talking about. There are several boars that are located across the map that don't belong to any player in particular. These are random extra boars spawn, and they're a very good source of food. You'll often see players luring these boars with a villager and then using the scout to block the boars so that the villager can go back home all the way like 40 tiles without even taking a hit, because the scout is going to be blocking the boars, allowing the villager to carry those boars all the way back to the TC long distances. It's no problem. And so these extra boars are going to be a great source of food in the early game, and you'll see a lot of players definitely go for it. If you're a beginner, don't worry about luring it to your town center like that, but if they're kind of close and you want to take them, just send 8 vills or so, make a mill, and feast on those boars. Sometimes you can even have up to like 7 or 8 boars at once in a certain location, and the more you have, the more impactful it is to go ahead and grab them. Simple as that. We all love the free food. Another key element to Black Forest that is also quite random is the fact that it could spawn you a lot of pawns in and around your base. Now, if you're a beginner, I recommend just ignoring these pawns for the most part. However, if you want to know what the pros or what the seasoned and the veteran Black Forest players are doing with these pawns, is they're basically going to go ahead and drop docks on them and make a few fishing ships to take up the shorefish. Once the shorefish is done, they go ahead and make a ton of fish traps surrounding their docks, and so they base their economy on the fish and the fishing traps rather than on the farms. And it's a very unique and interesting way to play. However, it's very hard to pull off. Even I struggle doing this when I play Black Forest, simply because I'm not the most experienced player at it, and so setting up your economy completely differently with a focus on water can be quite a challenging thing to do. However, if you wanted to snag that fish, you can feel free to make a dock and a few fishing ships. It's usually worth it. Otherwise, important things to play for on this map are just the chokes. Playing for the choke points as early as possible will be the main strategy, and that's kind of how you go about the early game. You want to send villagers, maybe get loom, and start to wall the choke point as early as possible. And sometimes walling up really close to your opponents can allow you to control the game and allow you for certain strategies to work when otherwise they wouldn't work. For example, if you wall the choke point right next to your opponent's base as deep as possible, your opponent doesn't really have a choke point to defend because you control the entire gap of the choke point. And so if you would all of a sudden delete your walls and go for a rush, he would have no time to react and he'd have a really big space to defend. He can't just re-wall behind it and still control some portion of the choke. It's a kind of a complex topic to understand, but once you grasp the fact that the space on this map and in the choke points especially matter a lot for these early game rushes, you'll quickly understand that controlling the choke as high up as possible gives you the most amount of strategic options. You can either push, or if they start pushing you, you have that large distance of the choke point where you can just re-wall and continue spending tiny amounts of investment to set up multiple layers of stone walls that your opponent has to continue trying to break through. And this is the best thing to play for in the early game. Now that we have the gist of what to go for, let's talk about some proper strategies and what you're actually looking to do to win the game. Again, I'm going to be focusing mainly on team games, but a lot of these elements or a lot of these strategies work on every setting: 4v4, 2v2, 3v3, and 1v1. Let's take 4v4 Black Forest as our example because, as I said, it's the most played game mode. The general strategy you want to accomplish here is having the flanks control the early game chokes and just wall them up as fast as possible, and then the pocket's only concern is supporting the flank with the scout, the starting scout, and then just going for a fast castle into a boom. Developing the economy is extremely important in the pocket position because you're as far away from your enemies as possible, and so you're unlikely to be hit at all, and so you basically have a free pass to go towards the late game. Of course, it is your responsibility to, once you get to the late game, field a very strong army and be a powerhouse. If you don't have any strong late game units, usually your plan is going to be to go for a faster imp and look to use that timing of being an Imperial Age to either launch a trap push on your opponent with some small military and kill your opponent before he gets to his death ball super mega late game composition. So if you've got the strong late game, you get there. If your opponent has it, try to push him a little earlier and prevent him from getting to that crazy composition or whatnot. On the flank, after you've started the wall and you fought for the choke, you can have a couple options and a little bit of freedom here. Usually though, I'd recommend the flank to actually go for some sort of rush. And the reason for this is because if you try to boom alongside the pocket, you leave yourself very vulnerable to all kinds of rushes for your opponent to do. You leave yourself exposed to unique unit rushes. They can drop a castle and go for a strong unique unit with some siege. They can go for a fast imp and go for trebuchets right off the bat, hand cannoneer, bomber cannons, and completely wipe your base before your boom or your economy has time to pay off. They can go for monk rushes to go ahead and disturb you, break the walls, and convert all your buildings and units, which is very annoying. And they can do all kinds of things to break the walls, destroy your base, and then go towards your pocket. And so as the flank, it's your responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen. So I'd say the most common strategies is to do one of those rushes that I mentioned. Anything to open the game and create chaos so that once your pocket is fully boomed and has his late game units, he can go straight in because you've opened the map for him and you've set him up to be able to completely carry the game. And in my opinion, this is the perfect harmony between flank and pocket. There are some cases where you could boom on the flank if you have multiple layers of stonewall and if you control the choke like I mentioned earlier, but definitely be cautious that if you go for a boom and you want to set up your economy and go towards that late game and you're on the flank position, be cautious that there's a lot of dangers and make sure that you don't get pushed. The last strategy I want to talk about is the sneaky villager strategy. What a lot of people like to do on Black Forest is that before the walls go up in the early game, they'll send a villager right away to go towards the choke point, but instead of trying to wall up the choke point, they'll run right past it and sneak into your territory. What you'll naturally do is wall up the choke like you intended and then just forget about it and think you're completely safe. Then they'll go ahead and drop 1 or 2 archery ranges or just go for some scouts or any units inside your base, and they'll surprise you with a ton of units out of nowhere and completely destroy you because you don't have any preparation for it. This is called a sneaky play or a sneak vill or proxy buildings, anything like that, and it's extremely dangerous. However, it is obviously risky. If you see your opponents playing a little unusually, going up to feudal age way too quickly, definitely keep your eyes out for this. Also, if you feel like he didn't really fight for the wall at all, just send your scout around your base to see if you can find any stray vills. It's a really good way to not die to the strat. I only recommend doing the strategy if you know you can get away with it, because it's one of those high risk, high reward strategies where if you can get your vill to the other side, your opponent doesn't spot you, usually you can win the game off that. But if you get spotted, you lose your vill, you lose any of the production buildings you were trying to make, and then your whole strategy is kind of out the window. So it's a high risk, high reward strategy. Do with it as you please. Now that we have a general idea for the strategies you want to play, what the map looks like, and all that kind of stuff, let's talk about what Civ styles work the best. Well, in general, in the pocket position or even in 1v1s or any kind of team game, you'd really want some form of powerhouse late game units. This means something with siege onager, something with some really strong bombard cannons, something with a strong unique unit, like for example Magadai, the British longbowman with 12 range. Those are usually great units to go ahead and control the late game with. Other strong late game units are monks with +3 range, so block printing with redemption, so really strong monks that can convert these heavy siege and these strong units from far. Something like paladin, really fast, can be deadly. Something like battle elephant, even war elephant if your opponents aren't on halbs or monks. These units usually do quite well in the late game. However, one thing that I'd recommend is whatever you choose, make sure that you have the trade to support it. So especially in a team game, definitely trade as early as possible so you can field a lot of these gold units and then be able to replenish them once they die. A good timing to set up trade is just when you click up the Imperial Age, send like 4 or 5 villas to the corner, make a few markets, tell your allies to do the same on the opposite corner, and then start trading with each other as far away as possible to generate the most gold. Having infinite gold, or quote unquote infinite gold through trade, lets you go ahead and go for these expensive late game units and not be really afraid of losing them to some trash units like halberdiers and skirms. So on the pocket position, those late game powerhouses usually do the best. However, on the flank position, I'd really recommend civs that have these dangerous push options. Something like Turks being able to fast imp and go for cast age janissary push can be a great option to have that diversity. Some like Celts to go for a siege push, or even like fast imp onagers to cut the path and go for some onagers and support your pocket that way can be pretty incredible. But really the options are kind of endless. So anything that really supports a fast push or has some sort of tricky strategy up their sleeve is going to do the best on the flank. Alright, lastly, before I let you guys go, I'm going to give you guys a couple of pro tips on Black Forest, because even though I don't play the map that often, I'm still pretty solid on the map, and I'm no slouch on it, of course. And my pro tip number 1 is try to go for the wall early, but sometimes if you see your opponent overcommitting to it, simply wall a bit further behind and skip out on getting loom, or don't send as many villagers forward. Because sometimes even conceding the wall early, or getting a wall a little bit further behind, but keeping a good economy is a better trade than your opponent investing into loom, sending multiple villagers and getting that high wall. If you just keep a good economy, you'll be more or less safe. Another pro tip is for late game, put outposts and get town patrol across the entire wood line so that if your opponents try to cut through the map with siege onagers, you can see it coming a mile away and you can prepare defense. If you're completely blind and you don't see it coming, you can lose the game off one siege onager cut. Be aware of this and make outposts across the entire map and pick up that town patrol. It's the rare case where it's actually useful. Another pro tip, and my last one for this video, is don't be afraid to go to very high numbers of trade. You don't want just 20 trade cards. It's not enough to field those late game compositions. I usually go to at least 60 cards on a standard game of Black Forest. Sometimes I go up to 70 or 80 depending on the compositions I go for. Usually in late game you can kind of delete some villagers to go down to like 80 vills, and so you can have space for like 60 cards, and then you can have space for 60 military. Of course, don't rush to delete your vills. Go up to 140 as you're normally developing your economy, or however many you want to go for. Start making your military and then start trading, and then over time, once your gold and stone starts to run out, you can simply delete those vills and move on from there. Alright, that's going to do it for my guide on how to play Black Forest. I hope this helped, and I hope this was a useful video. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments what map you guys want to see for the next edition and next week. Thanks for watching, and peace!